Waiting for Jen, I think.
Okay, well, we can continue.
She's a huge part.
Other than I'll open
She's
the
a huge,
workshop.
yeah, she's a huge part of this.
Yeah.
I'm only half.
Do I need any of my cheat sheets from the last few times, or because I left them in my office? Probably not.
I don't think so.
While we're waiting, did you gentlemen get the email yesterday about Jamie Herrera dollars?
Yeah.
Bridge?
Yeah.
Did we want to have that discussion while we're sitting
Yeah,
here?
we can.
Yeah. I mean, discussion as far as I'm concerned, I can't see anything else that money's going through in our county, so heck, yeah.
So I talked with, Gordy sent over, the KC list, for what we have, and the bridge dollars are number one that we have for that list. So we've kind of already got it in at a big list, but we want to put it in as this is what we want.
Okay.
And then at our bridge meeting, we said, the Oregon delegation's going to put in for their side and maybe put in 5 million. We might put in 5 million. We may end up getting 5 million total.
Between us.
But that 5 million will go a long ways into phase 2 and 3 design.
Yeah, I think the way I would have been reading that transportation package, everybody looks at the giant dollars that are being given, and I don't think I think people are gonna be surprised at the end of it, how little of it is on bridges and roads, so. But yeah, take what we can get. I think it's gonna be a small percentage of the total dollars.
And so that's part of the fast dollars. So that's like the bringing back the old earmarks in essence,
Right.
which we're not allowed to do. But the big project, the Build Back Better project, what they're sloshing around right now, that's going to be a much bigger ask, probably 75 to 120 million dollar ask in that. Which, if we can get that, we're making real progress here.
I was gonna say, yeah, something that seemed like a pipe dream that would never happen actually has possibilities of happening
That's
because of free Chinese COVID money.
Is, and the mayor will support you?
absolutely.
Okay, yeah, no, okay, it's good.
You're gonna ask for as big a number as you can, or are you gonna set on 5 million or something?
Well, I think if I recall, the kind of idea is that each representative's earmark is somewhere around
15 to 20 million.
15 to 20, and so we don't want to
And
ask
she's
for,
got 4 counties, so.
it's just 7 actually, and so let's not, we're already hogging up more than our share.
We're better than that.
Well, you're not gonna get any argument from me on that. All 20 should come here, so, but.
She needs our votes next time, so they might come here.
Well, there's a lot more voters in I can think of one county in particular.
Yeah, but I don't think the other counties' voters are as pissed off as these.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I can
They
have
voted
this
for
there.
sanction or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, she was censured. Thank you.
Yeah, I would say shoot for the biggest number you can get and take what you can get.
Okay, I'll send that email in.
Well, good morning.
Good morning. So whenever you
We're getting
take your time,
we'll get it all
get your
figured out.
papers all out.
So I did send out a handout that was several pages, but I did bring a couple of printed copies. I wasn't bringing them for everybody. So if somebody wants one, I have some. If you don't,
I will take a print of it if you got
got
one.
one right here.
I'm one of those people that like to look at paper, but I like it electronically, so if I wanted
Go
to
back,
find
yeah.
it later, I don't have to dig through a stack
And
of stuff.
I did leave the training. I tried to do the BOCC thing. Did anybody else want to have a copy? Okay. Do you need one that you guys want?
So, continuing on our journey, today we were going to go through kind of Jen's, and Jen's going to be kind of the leader, I think, of taking us through her.
She's like,
Yeah. She's gone through and put together, we went through the visual part of her piece, I think in the very first session we kind of had. And now we are, she's kind of gone through and broke it into a spreadsheet, which is fund by fund by fund with what it's for, if it has restrictions, minimum balances, It's a lot of information, so it's hard to, so it's hard to get it all, but she's got it all on one sheet. And I think it's something that I know as the treasurer, when I got here, this would have been great. I mean, it's all everywhere, but we're trying to compile it into one area. And I think, so anyway, so our thought was we would go through these. And then my sheet that I handed out is what we call the county treasurer's report, or a bank statement, if you will. This is cash, strictly cash. I went out, and one of the things that we get kind of a little bit before we get started, because there's there's fund balance and there's the cash balance. I went out to try to put together something to kind of hand out, but I couldn't really find anything, because if you go through and search the cash bars manual that's provided by the state auditor, fund balance shows up in there 2 times, because it's cash. It doesn't have, there's no balance sheet in a cash state audit report. It's all revenues and expenses and cash balance. That's all it is. But we have fund balances, and we use the term kind of around the Glick County, because we do have them because we're somewhat of a hybrid model. So the numbers are kind of interesting in how they are. We function in the treasurer's office. We are cash. I mean, it's all great to have all the other pieces, but we go by the cash balance, and that's the number.
What is the difference between cash balance and fund balance?
Basically, the fund balance would be is if you had a balance sheet, you'd be able to reserve dollars against that, and so you would have a liability of some sort that would go on your balance sheet because you're.
So the cash balance is what's actually in that account, and the funds balance might be a lesser number because you earmarked something for something later.
Yes, but we can't really do that in being a cash county. That's kind of my point, is that when you go through, and Heather and Brenda can talk to this a lot more, but when we get through to doing the reporting to the state, we don't have fund balances. We have cash balances, and we provide them those numbers. So they're not in the number, there's no real place to find them. But a fund balance would be if we reserve some amount, or there's a restricted amount in there, and there's numbers that go in there.
We're going to show a fund balance that's 700,000 less because of a building.
Potentially.
It really is.
Yeah, and not even but yeah, if there was some other kind of form. In our world, what we do with those, and sometimes what we've done in the past, is we have to set up a new fund to manage those dollars so that it has cash and they're separated from there. You can't have restricted balance. I mean, you can have restricted balances, but you can't have a set aside, because we have no balance sheet. We are a cash county, so we have no liabilities we have cash, and that's it. So in going through there, I guess the challenge was there's really nothing out there to try to compare the two, because a fund balance is a term from GAAP accounting, and a cash basis term is, then cash basis accounting is designated and controlled by the state auditor, and they're the ones who write the rules and so on and so forth. I think we are finding more, and I'm a little out of my league here because I just deal with cash. This is more of an accounting auditor kind of thing. But as we see the state auditor doing different rules and regulations within the cash accounting, they are referring to GAAP a little bit more than they have in the past. So there is those are good things, but that still doesn't mean we don't have a balance sheet. I mean, we don't have all that. We have revenues and expenses, and we have a cash balance. And that's what this report represents. So if this report is somewhat different, or there's an amount, or maybe it's $20,000 off, we could go figure that out, because I know in the past, Glenn had fund balance reports, and they were very, very, they're the close on it, almost the same on some stuff, but there's some where maybe they weren't 100%, and there was maybe an amount, and that was because we had some fund balance difference of the two, and we can go through that. But I just want to preface this with that, and we'll go through and figure those out, but there is a little bit of difference. So this is actually the balance to the bank that we have, and everything balances. I've only printed you out through 500. This goes on to 700 from there because of all the special purpose districts and everything, but we're really going to focus on only the county today. Yes, sir.
It's okay. Lost my thought. Or no, I know what I was thinking of. The difference between cash and fund balance. I mean, the kind of the way I manage it in my own head is the cash is cash. It's no different than the checkbook. We have all these fund balances. If we have categories of things that we're gonna spend money on, we have allotted, so we've reserved for budgeting purposes. You know, if I have, you know, $1,000 in my checking account, that's the cash balance. But I know, oh, I've already planned on 100's gonna go for my car payment, 250 is gonna go for my mortgage payment. And so that's the fund balance is what I've set in each, but it really is incorporated into that total cash number.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah,
that?
it all does come in there, but it's just, there is no real fund in
No, in
true
cash, there isn't
accounting.
any
There's
any
no
more
fund
than that's my
balance.
own
The fund balance is what
internal.
rolls over at the beginning of the year in the
Right.
cash. That's the fund balance. That's
Right.
the only number.
Right.
So that's where it kind of, and that comes back to, and we are unique in this hybrid model that we have. I mean, I've talked to a lot of counties and
We love being unique.
yes, we are unique.
We may eventually get to be less unique. but we-
I wouldn't
that
do
would be
that.
nice.
I don't think there would be, yeah.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Okay, so the papers that you have in front of me, the first one you've seen before, we went over that last time. I just included it here in case you didn't have it on hand. Second one, you had asked for visuals as to how, like which departments were controlling which funds. So there, I've given you two different visuals for that. Second one is a copy of the first with kind of tags on the outside of it. The third has a breakdown of the general fund at top and which departments are within the general fund. And then those departments that have multiple funds are below that, and then the funds that they're responsible for.
Can you remind me on your second one with the, so you've got, you know, 3 and it says auditor and 7 and it says BoCC. Is that referring to, why is WSU a 1 and the assessor is a
Those are the
3?
department numbers.
And are those set in bars or is that just we randomly assign those numbers?
I'm assuming we ran,
I'm assuming that we
assigned
assigned
years
them.
before we got here.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, that's good. I don't
Okay.
know, because I've often wondered,
Rock and
it's like,
chisel
why are we
somewhere,
a
they came
7?
up with that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know
chisel
Glenn
and
gave,
stone somewhere.
Glenn gave the answer to that at one point as to how it came to.
Just
be, but
because.
I always
Because I
find
said
it,
so.
There was some alphabetical logic at some
In the
point.
beginning.
Some alphabetical logic that we went with the W. and
that's
the A.
what I get, I've always chuckled about that because.
Okay, I just wondered if there was some overarching logical reason why
There
those
probably was
numbers.
at some point in
some
time,
Okay,
and
Well, and
so
you'll,
when the Romans set up our financial
Yes.
40
system.
years
now-
ago, they're gonna go, wait, 40 years from now, they're gonna question this. Wait, watch.
and so I pulled my data straight, directly from Kayenta, so there'll be a couple more things that you see, like under BoCC department, Fund 133 Affordable Housing comes up. On the third page, it's under both, because Kayenta actually has 133 as a BoCC department, but I know that it falls under economic development. So I have them in both locations, because I wasn't sure exactly why it was coded under BoCC.
It used to be under BOCC.
Okay, so I left it just because I didn't have the knowledge.
Of course, I like to think that all funds are under BoCC.
budgetary purposes, you're probably correct.
And then the last,
Do I hear Brenda stomping downstairs?
She said Heather.
the last, I believe, 3
She's not even
pages,
in the building at the moment.
Okay.
You're safe.
Yeah, okay,
For a while.
thank you. At least for a little while.
the last 3 pages is the nuts and bolts of each fund. What SAO has directed for each type of fund, what fund, what it is, which department it falls under, any RCWs, WACs, codes, resolutions that apply to those funds that I could find, where the revenues generate from, and if there was a minimum balance, those are there, and any restriction notes that I could find.
I have a question. Should VRNR be on here as well, or is it excluded for some reason?
VRNR?
Yeah.
It's under the 500s, I believe.
Oh, I didn't see it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there it is.
It is 502.
I don't believe, I might have missed it on the third graph, but.
And did you, were you able to pull this from Kayenta? This is in Kayenta, or did you
No.
have to build this yourself?
I had to build this.
That's what I was guessing.
I
The
was,
first couple
I was
columns are
able to,
Kayenta.
yeah, I was able to pull the fund, sub-fund, and the description of the fund straight from Kayenta. That's why there's parentheses around them, because that's just how Kayenta has it configured, but the rest of it I had to build.
This is great. Thank you.
Yeah, this is a great document, honestly, is, yes, and having it on one sheet, being able to look at it,
Yeah.
Jen's done some great work here. So we were just gonna start at the top and go to, were there any questions, I guess, with the charts that Jen had put together with the different departments or anything, or if they come about, we can go back to them. We were just planning on going down through this list fund by fund, as fun as that sounds. So
We're gonna do it alphabetically.
we,
Starting with W.
yeah, starting at W.
I think we need one of those wheels that we,
Yeah, there you go.
Next
And then
we'll do-
let's talk about this one.
let's talk about this one.
So current expense, and I'll let Jen go through the different pieces that she has on here, and then we can go through the treasurer's report as it relates to that.
SAO notes for the current expense is, the general fund current expense account should be used to account for and report all financial resources not accounted for and reported in another fund. For reporting purposes, the local government can have only one, although a local government has to report only one general fund in its external financial reports. The government can have multiple general sub-funds for its internal managerial purposes. These managerial sub-funds have to be combined into one general fund for external financial reporting.
So basically what that means is when we file the annual report, we roll up the custodial fund numbers and some of our, like the law library, no, that's a separate, there are some other little.
There are
funds
some
that get
100
rolled
funds.
up because they're not large enough to
Have
stand on
their
their
own,
own.
stand on their own.
And so it does have a minimum balance of 1.2 million or 1.25, excuse me. And the treasurer's report this is a view of March only. So for example, in the current expense of March, we started with a balance of 2 million. We had receipts for taxes or other things of 794,000. Netted transactions are where we actually booked a revenue to an expense. So the auditor doesn't like that, well, not that they don't like it, but typically in your bank account, anything that's a deposit should be a revenue. So they want you to tell them why you're booking a revenue, a deposit to an expense bars. For example, if you used your company card and purchased, this is probably a bad example, but it's an easy one.
Yeah.
You use your company card to purchase something personally and you have to pay the county back for that. We have to deposit your check into a 5 account because we're going to expense that out. And so we have to place that in there. So that would end up in something like that.
So if that happens, hopefully that happens accidentally.
Oh, yeah.
Not on purpose.
I don't think it's never, but I mean, it's a lot of times I think nowadays with the way the cards are stored, maybe if somebody's ordering on Amazon or something. And
Say, I grabbed it once in a while, and went, oops, wrong one.
Yeah.
But I just want to make sure it's not a.
No,
It's right. I've had 2 in my whole career, and in my examples were I was traveling and it was like they put my food, my meal on the hotel, and they just charged it all, which we don't do that because we do per diem or we get reimbursement. And so
Right.
I had to write a check to the county
right.
to reimburse my meal that they charged in my hotel room, which I then submitted for my meal reimbursement. It was really more of an accounting, it wasn't it was outside of policy. You can't, you're not doing it.
And so like in that situation, we would have had to take your money and deposit it to an expense bars number. And so that's what's captured in that netted transactions.
So
Generally, when that
Refund.
happens, it's because we've gotten a true refund for something that's an overpayment.
Well,
Insurance is one that happens.
Oh,
Like at the end, if we get if our premium was too much and so we got a refund on insurance or something like that, we would have to do that.
okay.
So the minimum balance of 1.25, is that based on internal policies? Is that based on auditor's recommendation? Where's that one come from?
I think we,
That's an internal resolution.
Yeah.
All of
We
the
have,
minimum.
we've
all the-
adjusted that
yeah.
before.
the state
All the minimum
auditor,
balances are internal resolutions.
Okay,
the state auditor or the state, you know, there's nobody says you have to have this much in these. It's all our choosing. And so then, we had some journal entries that were in there this month, and then we had expenses of 1.3 million and some e-transactions would be if we pay excise tax electronically or something like that. So we had 1.3 million of expenses and our ending cash balance is $1.4 million. That is in March, always ends about there because we're about ready to start to pick up our taxes. So if we went and looked at this in April, even though, yeah, our minimum balance is 1.2, we're in a term, we're now going to start going the other way. And so, you know, that's not a concern. That's why I just want to make sure it's not like we're headed to, we don't need to address that. It's going to be addressed by tax payments.
This is our leanest.
Yep, March is a dry season in the treasurer's office.
Get on that, Greg.
So anyway, so this would be for this fund, this is where we're at and this is where it would end at. And these dollars and everything in there relate to all of these departments and everything that are on the top part. And that's everything that's flowing through that fund. Any questions on that? Okay.
Okay, the 100s are special revenue funds. SAO notes say that these should be used to account for and report the proceeds of specific revenue sources that are restricted or committed to expenditure for specific purposes other than debt services and capital projects. Want to elaborate on that?
I have a quickie question on that, all these 100 funds. Do each one of these funds have their own, let's call it bank account? Or is it all just one thing and we're just have our own little earmark section that we know?
I kind of like to think of the funds as separate bank accounts.
They are separate bank accounts defined right here, but every dollar in the county for every district is managed through two bank accounts. Through two cash bank accounts. We have other bank accounts that we have set up to do other types of transactions, but that's why the treasurer's report is, it's kind of like my document because we actually reconcile this to this sheet to the bank. So if somebody, you know, is looking in Kayenta, we can only do that really every month. We can't do it during every day. I mean, we reconcile every day, but really at the end of the month is when all the things come together. We do our final reconciliation, and everything. So
So we have two bank accounts, but I should probably think of these as individuals.
I think of each one, then that's exactly what I do. And I think of each one of these as their own bank statement. So every column, you know, on that fund one, that's their bank statement. They had that many expenditures and that many revenues, and we can go through and tick all those off. So yeah.
Because these in reality every one of these are that you can't mix the money, like the pool of money you're dealing with, but I can't take, flood control money or I can't take auditor's O&M money and spend it on something else.
Right.
Well, you can, you just get trouble.
Well, yeah.
Well, first I can't,
You might
because
do
she
some
will
time.
come down
Brenda
and hit me in the
will.
head.
Yes.
I can't even get to the try part.
so what about all our 700 funds, all our special purpose district dollars? Are those in those two checking accounts as well? So it's all that together? Okay.
Which is why in the last 6 years since I've been the treasurer, the state auditor has a bigger grab now. And so we give them more and more information of all these funds. When I first became the treasurer, we just focused on the 500 funds and balancing these pieces and those. Now they want every piece of information that we have for every one of those districts. And now they're going out, and that's what we are working with the districts on, is making sure that all of our records are I mean, not that they weren't reconciling before, but that, you know, because they're having this database that they keep track of all these pieces. And that is a huge difference in the last 6 years. Reports have changed. So much has changed. And really, there's been a lot of change in banking, just in general. I would say the banking industry has really, you know, over the last 10, sure. But I mean, we came across the file the other day where in the treasurer's office, they used to call the 800 number and punch in the bank account number to get the balance every morning. And, you know, and now we have access to that all day long on the.
So now let's say like cemetery district or something, special purpose district over there. they're doing their own accounting-y type stuff, but you're in charge of overseeing that to make sure that they're not screwing up?
No,
How does that work?
technically, we're just their bank, I mean, or their treasurer. They are to pass their own resolutions. They are to authorize their own expenditures. So their expenditures come to the auditor's office and get cut just like that. We issue all warrants. So the treasurer is responsible for all revenues and disbursements, or deposits and
You're just being
disbursements.
the banker for them and not having any oversight on how they conduct their.
Yeah, essentially, unless there was something unlawful, then we would then report it. We would either
Well, I
send
guess
it.
that's where I was leading, is your oversight is to make sure they're not screwing up.
Right, that there's not like some wire that's getting sent to some Swedish offshore bank account or something.
And their commissioners, the special purpose districts, their commissioners do the same thing like you guys do with county bills. And so it does go through an audit process in our office because we are cutting the checks. So if we flag something, it's,
Because that's what I was looking for. Are we flagging things that we?
Yeah, and that goes then to the auditor because they're auditing it and we're managing the cash balance.
Right, but they're auditing on behalf of their elected board of commissioners for those special purpose districts, not for us.
Right,
You're doing that function for us on things that belong to us.
Yes, and that's a way more intensive audit when it's internal to the county. We require that you provide backup documentation that we don't require for the special purpose districts because they are really in charge of their own finances. We're just simply administering the checks, but we are paying attention to whether or not, they're hitting, say, Fire 2 is hitting Fire 3's fund because they mistyped a number, or there's some, payment to something that clearly looks like it's out of whack. So
So do you have do you do all the AP for all the special districts, or do some do their own? Can they do their own?
Rural 7 does its own.
there's a minimum balance on fire districts of how much you have to do your own.
Like, if you have if you're at a certain level, then you're
You
considered.
you could do your own if you chose
If you
to.
chose to. And I assume we do it, well, I know the answer is, we're already paying for it as just general government. So you don't charge the
We
districts.
do charge the district.
Oh, you do? I did not know that.
The districts get charged 50 cents an invoice.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't cover postage.
I was gonna say,
That doesn't cover
that
expense.
seems a little.
But it's been that way for certainly as long as I've been here.
Okay.
So there is a
It's probably been that way
minuscule
since.
charge.
Okay.
Stamps were 15 cents.
Yeah.
Right.
And see, like the treasurer's office, our fees are kind of covered have been covered in penalties and interest, which goes to the county general fund. So on all taxes, so when you look, that's kind of why in my budget, I always provide how much money we're getting for penalties and interest and where my budget is. And those, I don't want to say they're the same, but they're, it is an offset of some of that. So it's one of the reasons why I'm so, the penalties and interest thing is such a piece, because then, I think that is a good point, that the auditor's office and the treasurer's office, we are doing work, we're elected by the county, and we are doing work for all the districts in the county, a lot of, not just the under 500 funds. Okay. Great questions.
Do you want to dive into each fund or?
Yeah, I think we might as well just kind of go through them, and if they get, I think we should at least, yeah.
Okay, the notes on the far right are specific to the fund under the special revenue funds. So the road fund, of course, is restricted, and it has reporting requirements through WASDOT and CRAB. They have a couple RCWs that pertain to that. And do you want to talk about the revenues or?
I was just, it's in here, and I think if you guys have questions, the current county road fund balance in March was 4.8 million, and so that's, and we'll just go through. You guys have both pieces to look at. I think if you have questions.
Can I interject one?
Yeah.
Second? Just because revenues and expenditures in this, this checking account reconciliation, you have to look at it like if you're reconciling your own checkbook, that if you've got any outstanding checks, the bank isn't aware of them, because the way that the Kaienza system hits, when we put in an invoice, it's triggered by the invoice date. And we just got that question the other day from a junior district. That if I put in a March invoice but don't pay it until April, it doesn't, in the system, it's an expenditure in March,
When you write the
But-
check.
right? When you write the
When the
check.
check
But it
is
doesn't
cut.
hit the cash
When it
balance
doesn't
until
hit
it
the
actually
cash.
clears.
No, that's not true.
With the warrant register date, right? Isn't that when you're hitting the,
We're hitting the cash whatever day you guys put in there for the period.
yeah, I think it hits the warrant register date because that's the actual issue date. But Kayenta on the budget side is hitting it. So if the invoice date was March 31st, but the check run date was April.
Yeah, we don't
1st.
care about what the invoice date is. We care
Right.
about when the check date is. So if we
Right.
cut the check with
So your check.
30/31, we pull the Kayenta actually does this all for it. It pulls it from the sub funds and puts it into two funds that are the AP clearing and payroll clearing, and it sits out there. So none of these, that the whole float of checks is not handled within the funds itself. The funds, once they issue a check, the cash leaves their fund.
Right,
But it'll
but
hit
the
the balance.
budget hit for the invoice is the date of the invoice. So sometimes there's an overlap between months, because you wrote the check, July 31st, but it wasn't cashed until August 1st. Every once in a while, there's an overlap. And then
Okay. I didn't realize, I guess I didn't realize that. That seems odd to me, but if that's what it does.
Okay. That sounds like more of this. Yes.
I was gonna say, that sounds like that, and it sounds like you're.
I mean, it's-
The
continuing
good part to understand is so if you're a junior taxing district, it's coming off of this, because you might, like, as a junior taxing district, you put in your AP on the 25th, but it shows up on your fund balance the next month. And then it moves from yours to AP clearing and then out, but the money's still in the bank account until they deposit that check.
No, once a check is cut by the auditor's office, let's say that the road fund writes a check for $1.2 million and they date it today, that money will flow from there. So that comes out of the individual funds. We have two funds that aren't listed on here that are 600 funds that are 633 and 636, which are all of the uncleared checks. And those, so no fund is allowed to run. That's why if you go down below there, these ones all under warrants, they don't have any warrants issued or outstanding. And that's why their cash balance is what it is, because they're not issuing. If we had Fire District 7, for example, they would have a previous month's outstanding balance and that, but they have to maintain in their fund balance that cash. They can't invest that and they can't play the float. They have to assume that once the check is sent and mailed, it's redeemed in theory.
But what I'm saying is those budget reports that Brenda sends out every month, if the invoice was dated March 31st, but the check was cut today, it's reflected in the cash today because that's when you get the information, but in those budget reports, it's reflected for the month
From the
in which
invoice
the
date.
invoice was dated. So sometimes you have to look at both pieces to truly get an understanding of what the financial picture of a fund is.
So just for curiosity, so when the AP those are processed, the money immediately goes you pull all the money from all the different funds and it goes into the clearing fund.
Clearing fund.
And it's sitting, and it may sit there, that actually sits there until those checks come through.
And the
clear.
balance of that fund is exactly your outstanding balance of checks.
Okay. Are you allowed to invest that money?
Well, I
In the
mean,
interim?
in
Because it could be a lot of
in
money.
theory, we are investing it because we're investing the county residual.
Okay, and then that's where that is incorporated,
I mean, that would be part of your, there would be an amount, but yes, that is.
okay.
That's where the float is all happening, is in there, in your county residual dollars.
Okay. All right, let's get out of the
Yeah,
weeds. Let's get out of the weeds.
No,
Move
I-
on to certain market leaders.
No, you're fine. I think those are,
I mean,
So Fund
I like
103.
this discussion because I can read this at my leisure.
Yeah, that's
These
true.
are my questions.
Yeah, because this is, again, I have questions that, like, I don't know how that works.
No, and I think this is good. I think it's good to talk about. And like I say, it is different once you get outside of the county because, and we didn't bring any of those from other districts, but I mean, it all is in the piece of where it's at, so.
Fund 103 is the GIS fund. Public Works manages that fund. It has a $20,000 minimum balance, and it's for the computer mapping system. 104 senior services. There's an RCW related to that. Its revenue sources are grants, landfill, state service programs, United Way. They have a minimum balance of $100,000, and it's for provisions of transportation and programs to the elderly and disabled. They have grant-specific restrictions. Each grant comes with its own special set of rules and reporting requirements.
That's
104.
gotcha.
So a question, so our minimum balances are internal.
Yes.
And if you roll below that minimum balance, because you could do it, because you just had to pay the darn bills and you're waiting on the money to come in, does the state auditor know that we have minimum balances on each fund, and will they see it, and then will they flag it if we go below that minimum balance?
That is a potential, yes.
That is a potential.
And so we had this happen with emergency management, I believe, not skipping ahead, but Fund 120, is it 127?
I think so.
Anyway, they have and it was literally just a timing issue of the dollars. And I think that's one of the reasons why we added these balances on here, because I think we do need to revisit that at some point in time, and we're going to kind of stick that on a parking lot item of why, because as we're going to, and I think this is where the minimum balance thing came from, is that we do allocate directly landfill dollars into some of these funds. And so I think the point was we wanted to make sure that they were managing their dollars. But on the other hand, we have, you have a fund that has, like, for example, let's say that we allocate the dollars for the landfill to Senior Services Fund 104. Once it's really in 104, it's really difficult to get it back to some other fund, which is kind of back to the conversation we've had about making sure that we get dollars into 125 if possible, or leveling everything back out, because those minimum balances and those balances of where the things are at. So I think that what was happening is they were trying to set the minimum balances so that we were doing our revenues and getting our grant dollars back, and everything was, the cash flow was working. Sometimes we can trip on those minimum balances where there's a legitimate reason. And so then that gets us some risk to the auditor, because the auditor doesn't tell us we have to have a minimum balance on anything. We're doing it. But then if we don't follow our own process, then that's where we get in trouble.
That's the problem.
I do believe that the resolution's verbiage does allow for you to dip below that. There was something in there regarding, I don't remember verbatim, but it was something about the minimum balance was to be able to float those departments at the beginning of the year when grants were not timed right, like you're saying, like the current issue. So I believe it's not quite that restrictive, but I'd have to go back and pull that
It's
resolution.
more of a goal.
And I think part of the challenge is departments are interpreting that differently.
Right.
Jeff just set up a meeting with Jen and I to talk about 107. It's a struggle there as well, the 911 fund and others.
Right.
Yeah, the state.
And I know my interpretation of it is that that's a cash flow reserve, so that they can do, not that you can never drop below it, because otherwise that is like dead money.
Yeah, why have it?
Right.
Why have it if I have a reserve that I can never use? The whole point of it was supposed to be, here's your revenues come in at different times during the year. How those got set was, what's your likely, year or monthly cash flow, depending, and it was different fund by fund depending on when you got your money.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're getting regular grant reimbursements once a month or once a quarter, how much are you going to have in there to cover your typical AP and your typical employment expense during that period? And we got to make sure that you don't run out of cash to pay things until you get reimbursed. That's what that number is, not, oh, you always have to never, you know, you have to have $100,000 sitting in here that we're never gonna touch. No, that should be over in the accumulated, so we can use it somewhere else.
And
if
that's
we
where
need
these
it.
That was
is
my
107,
interpretation.
He's gonna go negative.
But he's not gonna be negative below.
No, it's gonna go zero.
He's gonna be-
Oh,
There's
okay,
a
well,
chance
that's a
that-
problem. That's different. That's what we do, we need to
Public
change
health
his
negative.
other number.
A real negative.
That's
Well,
bad.
That's bad, no.
That,
But you
that does
can't
not
do
make, I
that.
don't like to sit here and be hearing that here. It would be
No.
nice to have gotten a call about that.
Yeah.
Potential.
Potentially.
So yeah, we have zero funds that have, and I mean, you can't have a negative balance at the end of the month.
So
Didn't
what
work for my
happens
kids, it's not gonna
Yeah.
work.
What happens if you do go negative at the end of the month? Do we pull?
Well, we've never had that really happen because we've had, so far since I've been here, we have, I mean, like public health, which did go negative, but we had a lot, we could see that coming and we established a life preserver for them in the line of credit, which has been paid back, and that's now not there, and they have a reasonable cash balance, as we'll see as we go through here. So, I mean, but yes, I mean, those are things that we need if people, and I think the
Say
kicker,
something before you're getting in
that's what I was
trouble.
just gonna say. It would be nice if people would reach out to, because there's a difference, because here's the problem. These people that are managing these funds, they have budget. 107 has tons of budget. They can run things through AP and payroll because they have the budget. They just don't have the cash to pay those. And people get those confused as to what they are, and they're going, oh, I have money. Well, no, you don't. You have budget. You have budget room to be able to expend these dollars, but you have no cash to write the check for those. And so that's kind of where the training goes. And I think our expectation is that these department heads are managing that. That's their responsibility.
So,
And
I'm sorry.
it sounds like Jeff can see it coming
Can see
and
it
is
coming.
saying, hey, okay, hey, we need to figure this out.
So, since this is a good little learning experience for me, why is this happening? Is he's spending funds now that he was gonna get in grant next month?
No.
Or
So, the funds that go to this fund are coming from a state grant, from the military department. And those employees that manage that grant have been moved to the state EOC for the pandemic. So they're backlogged because they're trying to get out money as fast as possible for the pandemic. So his regular grant is backlogged and they are slow paying, is
Okay,
his situation.
And that's not, I will be honest, that's not uncommon per se. I think that we are seeing that there are things like that. I talked to somebody from the state treasurer's office the other day. They still have not been to the office in Olympia since March of 2020.
so this, I mean, he's budgeted to spend this money in, let's say, April, because that's when the grant should have been here. But because it's now not coming until May, he's having a 30-day whoops.
And
He's
this
gotta
one is
find-
very restricted by RCW. So yes.
Right, and we had a similar in senior services 2 or 3 years ago when the legislature went into, 27 special sessions. They didn't get, they didn't adopt and they made all these commitments for funding. Well, normally they know what stuff is, things have been done in, April or May. They get the contracts out, they get them signed, and by not necessarily the first, July 1 of the biennium, there's a check, but usually fairly close. Well, they didn't even get done until, and so it was like, they were like, you're not gonna get any money till October. We owed you July 1. And it was the same thing where like, well, we're gonna have to take some of our money and put in there because they have budget authority, but she has no cash. And so we loaned basically the state money in a sense.
So essentially, this isn't our department or our employees' fault budgeting wise, other than maybe they should foreshadow having issues and come to us a little earlier, other than.
Yeah, I mean, and I think he is. I mean, I think there's some of this stuff that you don't know until you know, but we have to, I mean, kind of like, I use the health department as a primary. I mean, we could see that was coming, and we could look at the trend, and we could see where we were at, and we could see the reimbursements, and, you know, we knew that there was a lot of money being thrown at the health department and different things that they were trying to do. We had, you know, and so we dealt with all the pieces, the staffing part of it, the line of credit, and so far it seems to be working, and things seem to be going well over there. But I think that's it. Those things are happening, and I think they're happening not just for emergency management, I think, and we have school districts that are looking for some money for a internet E-rate kind of thing, and we're not seeing it like we normally would. And so that kind of stuff, it's just a timing difference. And again, it's not large sums of money, so it's not causing any problems. But if you are getting large appropriations or large reimbursements on grants or something, that can cause problems. And that's why then we have the flexibility to be able to manage all the pieces.
So Jeff is managing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, no, this wasn't a call to him. This goes back to like my previous question on the oversight of the smaller taxing districts. Do we have somebody like oversighting this issue with our own little, or do we just not know because
The
it's
smaller taxing districts are being audited by the state auditor.
Right, yeah. So, no, this wasn't a hit on 911. It was just,
So as long as we loan the money to, like, if you're gonna go negative and we do the loan, we can pull that money back out to us when they get it. But if we just put money into some of these restrictive loans, it's there and we can't pull it back out, right?
So like, we're working on the resolution for the building. I mean, that has a term sheet, it has an interest amount. And I think that's why, back to that maybe is a good point. That's why the interest amount is on there. So no one fund is benefiting from another fund and so on and so forth. And we, you know, yes, it's all the same money, but it seems to be fair, because if these were their own standalone businesses, and I'm going to pick on the senior services because we have to be on that page, and they needed a cash flow loan, they would have to go to the local bank and they would have to pay whatever the going rate is. It's not that they're not a bad credit risk. There's no, you know, it's just they need a short-term note. They're gonna have to pay all the fees, all the pieces. So by us being able to do some of these things, we can do the better for the greater good by charging the interest and doing everything, and that way there everything's square.
Right, and to Commissioner Anderson's point, you want to do the loan, not just, otherwise it's just an appropriation.
Right, and that's actually the difference.
And it's like we
It's a
just
loan
basically
versus an
raise
appropriate,
your
right?
budget
Right.
by doing that.
Or your fund balance.
Or
And
your
that's
fund
kind of where
balance.
we went back to with the fund balance and getting back to the budgeting. You know, when you come in, and I say you, when the department head or the person managing these funds comes into the board to ask for an additional budget lift, the answer is, where are the dollars coming from? Well, if the dollars are coming from fund balance, then they might be getting an appropriation that's greater than the expenses that they're getting. So they have that money in here, which is one of the things we've discussed. Is it's nice having that in a place of 125 where these guys are managing to their piece, and then you guys can appropriate that to where you think it needs to go to for the greater all of the funds, so that we don't have one fund getting greater or less or however.
This is a question based on Commissioner Anderson. I don't know if it's for the auditor or the treasurer. If you just put money into a restricted fund as opposed to a loan, does that money then take on the restriction? But
Yeah, because it's once the
deposit.
fund, it only goes one direction.
Then it can only come out
You
under
can't,
that.
under those strings, it taints that money. It gets colored, and it's.
Which is the reason for the restricted funds. I mean, that there's a purpose of why they are there, so that it works the way it does.
Well, I think we kind of just hammered out 107.
Yeah, we
so I'm gonna walk away from that one.
well, yeah, but
Slowly.
No, that's great.
the conversation was had on 107, but it really wasn't a 107 issue. It was a training exercise.
Right.
Yeah.
That we just happened to be in 107.
Okay, 108 is a marine fund for the sheriff's office. They use that for, you know, I've seen payroll go through that fund for when they're out patrolling the waters.
Is that covering the VR&R too for replacing boats and jet skis? Or is that in a VR&R?
I don't know if they charge, but does it get charged against that fund to make their
Well,
I guess
the
I
way
might,
the VR&R works, like Jen will be working with the various departments. And so their rental rates are established and that money's going into VR.
VR&R, but is their rental rate being for
Is the
marine
boat
fund
being
coming, is the
purchased?
boat being paid for, their VR&R allotment coming out of the marine
I
fund?
don't know where they I don't know where the sheriff is.
I can put that on the parking lot. We
I
can,
guess-
Yeah, I'm just,
Let
yeah.
me clarify why I'm asking this question. Because if replacement of boats and jet skis is coming from grants and vehicle registration fees, that's one thing. If it's coming from our budget in a general fund of which we then have some control over, I might have a different answer on replacing a boat than if it was coming out of grant funds that really I should have no say in.
I know in the past they have had grants to pay for a big portion of some of their boats.
I don't believe it's coming out of Marine, but
I don't know.
It's
Really, so
This
you,
will be
their
something I
VR,
need
their
to know
portion
here
for their
within
boat
the next month or
replacement
two.
isn't being paid out of that, because it, to me, it should. If I buy the boat, if I buy the jet ski using those dollars, those restricted dollars, it's replaced, you know, that's I can't take that boat and use it for anything else because it can only be used for that purpose. Then its replacement should be being funded.
Yes, but they might
Out
be
of-
paying wages out of those
I-
grants.
I believe the only things
They
I've
are,
seen come
as
out of
opposed to-
Marine are wages, and some supplies, but I mean, it's a teeny tiny little fund.
Whereas I don't know that the boat and the jet skis are actually on VRNR.
I don't know that they are either.
I
but
think it's a
believe that-
one-off, you
It might
took
be,
the
they
money,
might-
you buy it, and then when it's, then you buy a
In
new one
another
out of
in-
that
In the 20
fund.
years when the new
Right.
grant comes your way.
Yeah, maybe, so it
Or
may be a
however.
non-issue, but
There's not much activity through the marine, but it's usually pretty
that's
minimal.
not a lot of revenue goes through that.
Okay, next.
Yeah. Thank you. But I
Okay.
like it here in the weeds.
Veterans relief.
Sure, the
Fund
big weeds.
Fund 110, Veterans
Good
Relief Fund. Do you want to talk about that since you're right here?
Sure, what do you want to know? That, it's levy funded. The indigent expenditures come out of that. Bill's salary comes out of that. Portion of my salary comes out of that. Obviously, some supplies and things for Bill, but it's a relatively small fund. I believe you guys put in about 50 grand a year under the levy.
So what it, for the relief of indigent veterans, so what can that be used for then by statute?
So, we have a revolving fund that's for indigent vets. And there's an RCW that defines what it can be used for. It's used for burial expenses. That's outside of the revolving fund, but it's used for burial expenses. It's used for meals, groceries, rents, that kind of thing for indigent vets. And because Bill is involved in processing the indigent vet claims, which come through the Legion, and I generally write those checks, portions of my salary, and then all of Bill's salary is covered through that fund.
Okay, so I always thought it was mainly just Bill's salary, but it's actually checks to buy groceries and other things and pay for the burials. And does Bill make the decision or?
So the way that works is an indigent vet goes to the Legion here in Goldendale or White Salmon and says, I need money for whatever, and there's a $500 cap per 12-month period for those.
Okay.
Is that in the statute or is that an internal policy?
I think that's an internal policy. The statute, I believe, talks about the limit on burial benefits, but that's kind of outside of the indigent piece. And so they go to the Legions establish whether or not they qualify for those benefits based on them. They have to be honorably discharged and some other standards of indigency. And then we reimburse the Legion.
How much?
So that, the Legion submits basically their reimbursement claim. Bill looks at it and looks to see that it meets the requirements of the statute and our internal policies. And then he forwards it on to me for reimbursement if he deems that it's reimbursement.
How many dollars a year do you think gets spent on that indigent?
So in fact, I just gave that report yesterday to the Veterans Advisory Board. In 2020, we had 11 claims for just over $3,900. $3,946.06 to be exact is what we spent in 2020. 2020 was a very lean year in terms of reimbursements to the legions. Sounds like there might be another $1,000 or so that was spent by the Legion that didn't make it through our pipeline, but it was.
That seems like a low number
It
for
was
what
definitely a lean
what we
year, and
typically
generally we spend, most of it is spent in the winter months and it's spent on utilities. We have tightened our restrictions on those expenditures and what actually qualifies in the last couple of years.
Who's we? Is that the Veterans Board or?
We is the Board of County Commissioners and the Auditor's Office.
Got it.
The role of the Veterans Advisory Board is to advise the Board of County Commissioners on the needs of the indigent vets and make recommendations on services that the county commissioners could provide to county vets. They don't have any say other than as Legion representatives.
Right, I didn't know if they would look at a claim like that and then submit it to the board or something.
No, they do not.
Thank you.
I think one piece of information on this fund that might be relevant just for us is that it is out of the general levy as far as the cap on the levy. And that's something I've worked on for years, legislative, not made any headway, is to try to remove it outside so it's its own, because it's so every dollar that we levy in that fund is a dollar we're actually taking away from the general levy, because it's you. And I have argued, that it really should be. I don't see an issue. People would, I mean, when you get your property tax bill and it's on there, it'll say, and it's, $3.12 or something. I think everybody's really supportive of that, but so we think of it as dedicated money. It is, but it's dedicated at the expense of taking that $3 from somewhere else. So it's a really easy way for, that has its own funding. It's like, it does, but it really decreased this money over here. And it really should be its own standalone, where it's its own levy. And because it's adjustable too. I mean, we're up to, it's a big number. It could be like, we could raise that levy if we had a bunch of, but that just lowers, it's the same dollar. And so, but it would take a legislative change to do that. And if that's considered to be a tax increase. And so it's a no-go. So,
Do you have any thoughts on election reserve while we're on that one?
Do you have any specific questions?
Yeah, are there questions on election?
Give us an overview and then we'll come up with questions.
Okay, so election reserve pays Brandy and Leah's salaries. It pays a portion of mine and Brenda's salaries. It pays the county cost, basically, of elections, because the county doesn't reimburse itself for our elections. The state only reimburses on.
Audrey.
Right, one of.
When they have nothing
on the ballot.
ballot.
Yeah.
That wasn't by accident.
Right.
Oh, no, we pay half the time.
Deliberate, yes. It pays for postage. The counties are now responsible for all of the postage on the ballots.
I have a kind of an offshoot question. This little Glenwood Fire District thing up there, what's the cost to hold this election?
So I can't give you that number.
Because you don't know it, or because?
Because we don't know it yet.
Right.
Because it's based on staff time, it's based on, how much paper we had to buy. It's hard costs.
Do you have just a thought off the top of your head? I won't ever.
Not that I would be willing to give you, no.
Yeah.
We only have like
Dangerous.
368 voters
Right.
in that.
I had this
So-
exact same conversation with Brandy and she gave the exact same answer. I tried to,
Who are we gonna try next?
what, it's just an
It was
idea.
about this size, but it didn't pertain to Glenwood at all, but was about 300 and some odd voters. What did that one cost? Ballpark.
I don't do the billing.
Ah,
But generally, you've got more
Your
than one issue on the ballot, and like KVH ran its own.
Yeah.
The second time it ran, its levy was all by itself, but that's a bigger district. And we've also started in the last 2 years, I think it is outsourcing. So, if I had an invoice for the printing of the ballot, the mailing of the ballot, I might be able to give you a closer number, but because this one is so small, we're doing it all in-house. So we don't have real numbers until we actually do the billing. But Glenwood
Great
will
way
pay,
to not answer my question.
Glenwood will pay the entire cost.
Right, I just was curious what.
what that number was.
Well, so it's one of the things when you're running one of these ballots, you have to figure, because sometimes the cost of the election could be almost half of what you're trying to
Well,
raise.
that's, I guess, was kind of my point is if Glenwood's trying to put this on, is somebody gonna be able to advise them on what we're probably gonna charge them? Or do they just have to crap shoot it and go, well, it could be $5 grand, it could be 50 grand, we don't know, let's just run it.
That's a decision that their board of commissioners has to make as to whether or not the risk is worth it, and they should be able to glean some information, having run prior levies, as to what that cost was. And it's going to be at least as much as it was for that one when they shared it with somebody. So they should be able to figure out a minimum charge.
I'm just not gonna get my question answered, let's move on.
So that would be the question for these juniors is do you want to run it on your own, or are you going to save 30 or 40% if you run it, a bigger one?
Wait for somebody else.
Yeah, and we do advise them that if they are the only ones on the ballot, that they will pick up the
100% of the cost.
How does that work?
But there's timing issues too, particularly with levies and having to get that information into the assessors so that you get your tax money. So sometimes they don't have the option of waiting.
Right.
Which I think is the issue with Glenwood, is that they don't have the option of waiting, so they've got to take the risk.
Additionally to the election reserve fund, they have a sub fund set up for the elections capital fund.
So that had to do, we haven't used that sub fund. We were getting, generally grants are reimbursable. We got a grant from the Secretary of State's office where they gave us all the money and then we just have to give back whatever we didn't spend. So we had initially talked about setting it up as a separate sub-fund. We didn't ultimately go down that path. So that fund has never been used.
True story.
Just
It was an idea we ran with and then realized it was.
doesn't work based on the way
Yeah.
that funds are set up in our system.
Okay. Fund 112 is flood control. This fund is to be expended as the state legislature may prescribe for the benefit of public schools, public roads, county, of the county or counties in which such property is situated, or for defraying any expense of county government in such, in such improvements, provided that when such property is situated in more than one state or county, the distributed share to each from the proceeds of such property shall be proportional to its area therein. That's what I could find for that.
Yep, and Lee manages this and most of this money is invested most of the time.
What is it?
It's really non-discretionary. It can be used for
Anything,
what is
any
needed.
general purpose.
The commissioners, the county has historically used it for, there was an irrigation district that was damaged due to fire and the runoff. And so they requested and received a grant, which was paid for out of that fund.
Are we talking Glenwood?
Yes,
Yeah.
we are.
What are you getting on that investment?
11 basis points. Zinger.
And that revenue into that fund, I mean, it's a pretty small revenue stream every year.
Yeah, well, it's $14.73 of investment interest. I'm sure that's what that is.
We're supposed to receive revenue, I think it's only been about 6,300 per year from the federal government.
Because there's deposits randomly as we get.
Right, and a lot of times I was able to call and I had a contact out of Portland, out of the
Yeah, where's
Army
our
Corps of
money?
Engineers. And so it's like, where's our money?
Well, so that, I guess that's my other question. How much money goes into this account?
They said about $6,300.
About
So
$6,300.
this is essentially just a savings account in case we have an issue.
Yeah.
Um,
We generally don't budget expenditures.
And there are
out
some,
of it
isn't there
every-
some
it's
property
just
that's
kind of
held, or doesn't the flood control own some property or anything, or no? Is that just my imagination?
I don't believe
I
so.
don't think, okay.
13.
113. Oh, treasures on, that's me. This is essentially set up for foreclosure, so all foreclosure fees and dollars that are revenue collected go into here for penalties and interest, or not for penalties and interest, those go into the general fund, but foreclosure fees such as, collecting for a title report or whatever, but then we pay the title report back out of this fund. So these are all collections. So right now, when we ran the tax title auction, all those dollars would be coming out of this fund, not the surplus though, because that's not the same. But because they were kind of the same parallel, we used some of these dollars to pay for some of the shared expenses or wherever, but yes, this is for foreclosure.
Fund 114 is the law library fund. Superior Court runs that. It has a minimum balance of $5,000. The county treasurer shall deposit in the county or regional law library fund a sum equal to $17 for every new probate or civil filing fee. It includes appeals and counterclaims, cross claims, third-party claims, civil actions collected by the clerk of the Superior Court, and $7 for every fee collected for the commencement of a civil action and for the filing of a counterclaim, cross claim, third-party claim, and any civil action in district court for the support of the law library in the county and the regional law library to which it belongs.
Assuming that can be books or internet type of.
I think it's all internet now. It used to actually be physical books, but we switched over.
Yeah, what are
It
we
was cheaper.
spending the money that's going?
So they still have a room in there, don't they?
Yeah, it's upstairs.
Well, and I think the law library improvements, they spent some of that out of that fund, I think.
But other than that, what are we gonna spend that money on?
We can't.
It goes through Superior Court, doesn't Mary Jo give those, yeah.
No, and at least in Superior Court, a lot of fees are waived. So just because we should be getting $7 for every civil filing, doesn't mean we're getting $7 for every civil filing. So.
Well, and I guess I would say who has who has the discretion on whether those dollars are spent or not spent or are spent on what? Is that the
District Court
the
judge.
judge itself or the law library board?
I think mostly, I believe it's the judge that.
The judge also, okay, yeah.
So is there, can you take that beginning cash balance and turn that into investments as well? So and let it sit there if you're not gonna spend it for a while?
If
They
they,
want it.
so the thing with that is we could, but right now the county's reinvesting that because it's not invested, so the interest not going in there, so that's part of the money that's going into the general
We're getting the interest.
residual cash.
Don't talk about it.
So
not like it's a
we
huge
invest on behalf of the funds that they give us, like 112, that's the prime example. Lee gives me her investment sheets, we work together, we figure out what she can do. If she needs to mature something early because there's an expense that she didn't plan, we do that. But we work with Lee to do that, and then that investment money goes right back into 112. If nobody gives us any investments, then we don't let all the county cash sit idle, we actually invest it, and then that money goes back into the current expense.
And at 11 basis points.
at 11 basis points.
Yeah, smoking.
It used to be much better in years past.
It's kind of gone up.
Fluctuated.
It was 20 basis points when I was the treasurer, then it got up to as high as like 2 and some change, 2% and something, and then we're back down. And
Well, yeah, interest rates are not existent now.
yes, we're having to not pay anybody to take it. That's good, I guess.
Oh, it's inflating away.
Coming away, yep.
Okay, 115 is the Victim and Witness Fund under the prosecuting attorney. This is for programs and services to assist victims and witnesses in crimes and against the offenders. The revenues come from penalty assessments, fines, or bail forfeiture, grants, and landfill. $116 is the county fair. You want to speak to that one?
I can. This is a fund that's set up. It's, as people can see, it's part of the 100 funds. So it is a county, it's county dollars. This is always the conversation. So the fair is a county event on county property, and this is where we manage their dollars as to what they are getting. They do invest their dollars. So they have currently an investment of the 98,000. So you'd have to add the 53 and the 98 to know what their cash balance would be. About 140. 100, somewhere in there, 150. But so that's the fund, and they have their own budget. They present that, and this is for expenses for the fair. And it's usually most all of the activity in this fund happens in July and August.
Is this, now when we put money or give money to the fair, do we put money into this account for them, or do we build things at the fair to account for said money?
Oh,
Yeah,
so we allocate dollars from the landfill to the fair fund.
What's that number, 20,000?
25, I thought, or 20.
Okay.
And then they pay back the county $10,000 to do fair improvements.
Or,
Those are the two that I know off of my head.
Right, and then any other, because since the fair is actually a county facility, it's like any other county
Yeah.
building that it's on the list and we
Right.
do capital improvements there all the
Right.
time.
117 is the weed fund or weed control board.
Grant restrictions, that's the only thing I for
Yeah.
that one.
And this comes from weed assessment fees for timber and regular weed control that are on county taxes, or we bill an assessment. It's not a tax, it's an assessment. I have to remind everybody of that because they always are like, oh, my tax. It's like, no, you have taxes and assessments. This is not an ad valorem tax. This is an assessment based upon, and the weed control board sets the rates. At the top of my head, I can't tell you what they are currently right now, but they're different for weed timber and weed, regular weed. And this is noxious weed. And so yeah, that's what this fund is.
all right, secondary question that might be kind of strange and odd. Is that actually, since it's not a tax and it's an assessment, say if you put in a project anywhere, Night Road, pump storage, whatever, are they considered a special taxing district? Well, they will get excess monies from that?
No, because they're not a special
It's just
taxing
an
districts are
assessment.
600 and above.
Okay,
This
good.
is this is assessment. So
Yeah,
the
because
property
they're
will
on
still
per
receive an
parcel.
assessment if it has, because it goes on the property based upon acres, weed acres or weed timber acres. And there's usually, I believe, and again, there's a flat fee and then there's a per acre amount, but I don't remember what those amounts
So
are.
it doesn't matter if it's $1 million home or a
Right.
shanty, you pay the same.
I will say with the weed department though, and this is one thing that the state is really hating to pay assessments, and they are starting DOT specific. When I say the state, I'm speaking of their agencies. Department of
Yeah.
Transportation is one of them. And they really don't, they're like, well, we're tax exempt. Well, you are tax exempt. You're not
You're not
receiving
an assessment.
taxes. This is an assessment, and you have to pay the assessment for the conservation district and the weed board. And so we have that, and they're kind of starting to bow their neck a little bit. And it's kind of not correct in my opinion, but that's just my own treasure opinion. I just
Well,
think,
them too then.
yeah. So anyway, so that is something to keep in track of with the weed, folks, is they are struggling on trying to maintain their revenue base from state owned property.
118 is auditor's O&M. It's restricted to historical document preservation, requires a surcharge of $5 per instrument of each document recorded. And then the deposit of that $5 is broken out and restricted as to which bar's revenue code it needs to go to.
So, portion of mine, Tori's and Brenda's salaries come out of this fund. That's basically its current expenditures. If we replace our microfiche machine, if we upgrade the recording system, if we do a big document retention, scanning, microfiching, digital imaging kind of thing, that would come out of this.
119 is economic development. That is got a minimum balance of $100,000. It's for distressed rural county tax can be spent on public economic development facilities and staff, assistance to existing and potential businesses to promote economic growth. There's RCWs and a resolution for that fund. And its revenue sources are grants, landfill, and distressed rural county tax.
I don't have much to add.
Okay. 122 county tax.
Actually, I'll back up,
Okay.
sorry. It's probably more of a question for Dave. How much of that do we actually spend on economic development versus how much of that do we spend on wages and salaries?
I think the resolution, I don't know if it directs, if it's 20% or 25% of it goes, so the 80% would go for, bricks and mortar and 20% for wages. But that's relatively recent. I want to say that was like
3 years ago.
3 years ago. It used to be 100%.
With brick and mortar?
Yeah,
Okay.
we felt like as we
And even at 25%, we're still low compared to a lot of.
have most,
Well, I'm sure, yeah. Okay, sorry,
Okay.
move on.
122 is the county tax refund fund. It's refunding of property taxes of state assessed utilities due to appeals.
And I have not seen any change in this fund since I've been here. It just stays that same amount.
123 is tourism, economic development, of course, has that fund. Lodging tax can be used for tourism marketing, supporting capital expenditures, of tourism and tourism-related facilities. Its revenue is lodging tax. There is a resolution in RCW for that fund. 124 is investigations under the sheriff's office. It's crime investigations and enforcement of illegal drug activities. Superior court fees and evidence confiscation funds that fund.
And this is the fund where the house in Lyle will get deposited into this bucket right here.
Human reserve, 125. That is your fund. It is emergency and disaster relief, capital programs, economic development, community development, funded by landfill, sales tax, interlocal agreements. Lee, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Well, it's kind of been a catch-all, and it's totally at the board's discretion of what those funds need to be spent on. It fluctuates yearly depending on the need. And there again, I try to keep as much invested as possible. And Greg's been really, really valuable because I've had major purchases starting, okay, this is going to come down the road. I need to make sure, so I was going to mature dollars. And Greg's like, well, let's just wait, let's hold off. And so he's very, very valuable to me to help. I try to get as much return as we can. So that's really been interesting. Having the COVID and all those expenses taken out of it was very confusing and stressful. When we do that this next time, I'd like to see it a little bit different.
there's not going to be a next time.
Well, like the
With the Resuscitate America money.
Yeah,
Oh,
that money's gonna
no.
go through here too, but now we have that option, we can actually talk to our coworkers, and I think that's gonna be way better. 'cause
And
it
I think we
was-
learned, I think there's some of the stuff we did, I mean, I think, we thought it might work and it didn't. And I think we've learned to where we can, I agree with you, we can discuss and make sure it makes it easier.
That's gonna
We
help.
hopefully have time to get ahead of it,
Yes.
reacting.
And these guys are wonderful to work with, all of them.
Anything else?
But we're still getting practically no interest.
No interest
No.
on it, no.
And the only time that'll go up likely is when the Federal Reserve rate goes up.
Yeah, I mean, the economic right now, I think everybody's just kind of waiting to see. I don't see rates. There's no, my crystal ball, there are things I read in the tea leaves. I don't think there's anything through the rest of 2021.
I kind of like the fact that we're not making any interest money on it, because anything we spend it on, if we were making more interest, when we went to spend it, we'd have to pay 10% more or 15% more. So it's not bad. I'm kind of okay with no inflation.
Okay, 127 is an emergency management fund. It is grant funded, interlocal agreements and landfill. There's a minimum balance of 75,000. This is for provisions of emergency preparedness programs, plans, disaster recovery and mitigation. They have grant restrictions, and their grants, I will say, are the most difficult grants I've seen to manage for the dollar amount that you're getting.
They like their paper.
I mean, they got their hands full over there dealing with those grants.
And as you can see, we're below the minimum balance. So this is one of those where, and I think that's where we need to bring in, I have on the parking lot to bring back the minimum balance resolution to make sure that have it as a that we just have the discussion to ensure how we interpret that or whichever. There's not a concern that it's bad. It's just, that's, where we're at as we go through. And we started out right barely under, then, we had a little bit, so we'll kind of be watching that. But that's one of the reasons why we wanted to put the minimum balance on here, just so we can have the discussion of where it goes and how it's most effective, so.
Okay, I'm gonna, if you quit, it's just, we're
Let
one
me ask
minute away
one
from
question
Go
before
ahead.
we end this topic. You were talking about grants and hard grants to lots of paperwork, blah, 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 blah. Do we have, or have we had grants that we get and then it's just too hard of paperwork that we don't comply with the grant? And end up eating it?
I don't know the answer to that.
I know we've said no, where we've
I know
had a
they
grant.
say that it's too much paperwork, it isn't worth doing, but have
Right.
we taken it and then?
I'm not aware of that, although I guess you could argue we probably have some that we're not aware, that it might have cost us more than we actually got out of it. I can think of a couple where we got the grant award, but when it came time to actually execute the contract, we didn't, because when they
So then you're just.
did the
sending it
analysis,
back
we
and
said,
saying no thanks.
we never even got the money. We just
Okay.
said, we're not gonna sign the contract. Okay, it is 10 o'clock, so we're gonna stop. So I will recess the Board of Commissioner meeting until, I guess, 1 o'clock out at the fairgrounds. We'll reconvene out there. And I will now, let me go back to, make sure everybody's here. Looks like they are. Okay, I will now open the Board of Health meeting.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys. I wish
I
we
didn't
had more
want to
time.
go farther than that, but
And if you guys have questions, we can go through that.
Thank you, Heather.
Okay, I will call the Klickitat County Board of Health meeting to order. I believe we have all of our board members are present. Hi, Aaron. Nice to see you.
Shane, I got a question for you. Do you guys stock vaccine at the health department? I would assume it's probably Moderna. That's just my question.
Okay. Okay, so we definitely have a quorum since we have all 5 of our members are here. And so I guess we can start. I would be looking for a motion to approve the agenda.
I'm confident you do it. Wrong too.
We've got to change the page. Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the agenda.
Second motion.
Okay, I have a motion and a second on the agenda. Discussion. Welcome our remote members as well. Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Okay, motion passes. Aye. Motion passes unanimously. That brings us to the minutes. Did folks receive the minutes and have an opportunity to review them?
Yes.
Okay, Sue, were you okay with that? Okay, and I would team members, or I guess in-person members, then I would entertain a motion on the minutes as well.
I move that we adopt the minutes from the last meeting.
March 18th.
March 18th.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion. And who, Aaron, who's doing the minutes? Is it? I mean, who's?
We record them and.
You
then-
just record them, okay.
Yeah, and then Kelly Sizemore.
So I know, because some meetings, folks that are not necessarily in the room like to know who's making the if you're not here sometimes. So sometimes as the chair, I'll restate. Sue made the motion. It was seconded by Jake, if that's not
That's helpful.
necessary.
It's helpful.
Is that
It
helpful?
for
Okay.
them, yeah, that helps them out a lot.
Okay, thanks. So they're not trying to discern from the
Yes.
recording
Yep.
who said what.
No, she'll be very grateful.
Okay. So we have a motion by Sue and a second by Jake to adopt the March 18th minutes. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Motion passes unanimously. That brings us to our next item. I have to keep flipping screens here. COVID-19 discussion. So we're going to start with a clinical update with Dr. Person. Thank you. I papered it out.
Good morning, board. How is everybody doing this lovely sunny morning?
It is a beautiful day today. So hopefully you have
Yeah.
nothing but great news, and your update is nothing but rainbows and unicorns.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm not sure if that'll be the case, but I think, overall things are positive. I did though want to spend a little bit of time talking about the recent news around the pause of the use of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, just to ensure that everybody understands the facts around that. This won't have much impact in Klickitat County, as it has not represented a large portion of the vaccines that we have been using, so it shouldn't affect our ability to continue to safely and effectively vaccinate our population. So the pause for the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, this is not a recall or any sign that there was a problem with how the vaccine was manufactured. In fact, calling the pause is really a sign that our systems to continue to monitor vaccines after they are in use in the general population is working. So providers are required to report deaths or any unusual events occurring after vaccination, whether or not they think the vaccine was related. And the reason for that requirement is precisely what we're seeing here, is to see if there are any unusual patterns, even of very rare events. So with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, through this monitoring, they did identify 6 cases of a rare type of blood clot, specifically a cerebral venous sinus thrombosis that was also associated with a low platelet count. And with having that, the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, which is our national organization, our national body that provides immunization recommendations, met yesterday to review the available data. And at this time, they are extending the pause. And the reason they're extending it is really to get additional information. One of the things that we look at when we see events occurring after vaccination is to try to find out, are we seeing it more often after vaccination than we would expect to see it in the general population? And with rare events like this, it takes time to gather that information. They'll also be watching to see approximately 7 million doses of Johnson & Johnson vaccine have been administered in the United States. So this occurrence is about, as they say, 1 in a million. However, about half of the doses of Johnson & Johnson vaccine that have been administered in the last 2 weeks. So what they will be watching is to see whether additional cases of this are reported after vaccination, and again, to gather more information about the incidence of this type of rare blood clot in the general population. Because we do have 2 other vaccines that have not had any reports of this type of blood clot associated with it, we know that in Klickitat County, in Washington, and in the United States, there are alternatives that we can continue to use to ensure that we can vaccinate the population. Vaccines, like any other medicine or treatment or anything that is used, there are always going to be the weighing of the risks versus benefits. Blood clots are not only associated potentially with vaccines. We know they've been associated with birth control pills. They've been associated with over-the-counter pain relievers. So again, there are always risks versus benefits that we are weighing. We know the risks around getting COVID-19 do include hospitalization, death, or long-term disability, and that is, our sole purpose for wanting to vaccinate the population, because we know that immunity through vaccination is safer than developing immunity through natural infection. So again, for Klickitat County, the pause on the use of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine should not have any immediate effects on the availability. And that's good, because today is, as they're calling it, Vax Day rather than Tax Day, because in the state of Washington now, anyone who is 16 or older is eligible to be vaccinated. So we want to continue to encourage everyone who to get out there and get vaccinated, particularly as across the state we are starting to see what they're calling the 4th wave, and the population groups that it seems to be most highly concentrated in. So where we're seeing disease rates rising the quickest is in our young adults. And so that's a group that hasn't really been eligible to be vaccinated in large proportions before today. So we're going to be hoping they will all take advantage of that opportunity so that we can make sure that this 4th wave isn't a tidal wave, but maybe just a little blip. Department of Health also yesterday released a report on vaccine breakthrough cases. And at this point, there is a case in Klickitat County that is being investigated, but has not yet been confirmed as a vaccine breakthrough case. Vaccine breakthrough cases are very rare. Across the state, they represent about 0.01% of the population that's been vaccinated. So again, vaccine is still very effective in reducing your risk of transmission. In the other counties that I supervise, looking at that data for the few vaccine breakthrough cases we had seen there, compared to the cases in unvaccinated, you were over 120 times more likely to developed COVID-19 over the last couple months if you were not vaccinated versus vaccinated. So vaccine, again, besides being very effective in preventing hospitalization and death from COVID-19, is also proving to be effective in reducing your likelihood of developing COVID-19, although it is not 100%. And that is it for my clinical update. So I'll entertain any questions if there are any.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Person. I did have one question as far as back to the J&J vaccine and is there some thought as to the time frame that symptoms would normally occur as far as the blood? I mean, is it in the first 3 days or a week, or is there some sense as far as once you get out a certain point, we're not seeing it again based on 6 cases, but is there
Right, and that's a great question. And the cases that they've seen have occurred within a few days to a little over a week. So right now, what they're saying is if you've been vaccinated and it's been more than 3 weeks, they don't see any risk of that. Recommendations to anybody who's received Johnson & Johnson vaccine, if it's been less than 3 weeks, they're asking people to keep an eye out for unusual symptoms. So what most people who have had this type of blood clot have reported is a severe unrelenting headache, severe abdominal pain, or signs of unusual bleeding or bruising. So anybody who sees those, who's received the vaccine within the last 3 weeks should see their doctor or, get checked out. But if it's been more than 3 weeks, none of the cases have been reported after that time frame. So that's kind of where we're looking at for risk of this if it is associated with the vaccine.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Christopher has a question.
Have any of these blood clots resulted in stroke?
From the limited clinical data that was presented at the meeting, did not see any that were related to stroke. There was one fatality associated with it, but did not see any mention of stroke.
Okay. And one last question. Does anybody know the age ranges of the people that are our current cases in the county?
Yeah, they're, I think, average of about 50 this week is where we're at with the active cases that we have.
Average age is 50?
Ish, yep. We don't have anyone.
I mean, I guess my question is, how many do we have in the 2030?
One. Currently.
So
Out
our,
of 9
our
active
percentages
cases.
are holding about normal. I guess I'd say, are we getting less elderly because there's more vaccines, or are percentages about the same as it always has been? Broken up by age range.
Let me pull that up for you real quick.
I should have looked at that before I.
That's okay. I have
Sure,
it right
that's
here.
okay.
That's why I don't leave anywhere without my laptop, because I have it all right.
I guess the reason I ask this is the big push nationally that, we're seeing a spike in the younger population.
Is that a
I want to see if we're reflected here as
So in our county, most of our cases have been in the 20 to 29 range. So out of 765, 149 of those have been in the 20 to 29 range. 21 have been 80 and over. 117 in the 30 to 39 range. So that's our biggest group right there. And that's the group that we're seeing, as Dr. Person said, the increased cases.
but the percentages are kind of holding.
Yeah.
Okay. Other questions for Dr. Person? No, I'm not seeing any from the board members online. Okay, thank you, Dr. Person.
Thank you.
We will move on to situation update. Ms. Quinn.
Yes. So I'm going to just go ahead and start with vaccines. So to date, according to the DOH this morning, we've administered over 14,000 doses of vaccine in this county. That means we have 22% of our county is fully vaccinated, which I think is a really big deal.
Yeah.
And over 31% of them have actually initiated the vaccine series. So I think based on the historical vaccine hesitancy in this county, I think even though that seems like a really low number, that we're still doing a really great job. And I'm really, really pleased with the numbers that we have. We still have vaccine clinics scheduled today. I know KVH and North Shore and Skyline continue to offer vaccines as well. And they're having clinics that are, they're getting a lot of interest, although not as much as any of us would like. KC Pharmacy recently joined the team to give vaccines as well. So you can receive vaccines through there, I believe by appointment only. So the vaccine program is going really well. Tomorrow at the health department, we're going to demo the new software we got that will take away all of the data entry for us. So it's going to take away the paper for us. In the next month, it should open up online scheduling for us. Skyline and KVH will also be using that software. I don't know their entire timelines, but that's going to really help residents of this county. They can just get on our website. They'll be able to just schedule when they want, what time they want. And that'll really take a lot of pressure off our staff and be able to make our clinics in just a lot more efficient. And then we'll be able to get more people through, which is our ultimate goal, obviously.
Give the numbers statewide for how many are fully vaccinated and how many have got the one shot. Again, I should have looked at this before today, but apologize for that.
34% initiated vaccine for the entire state of Washington. So we're right at the average for the state. No,
We're close. We're not lagging behind too far.
no. Total vaccinated for the entire state is 23%. So we're right neck and neck with the state as a whole.
Says, like I asked last time, do we have more vaccine than arms to put it in? But it looks like we're holding our own.
We've done okay with vaccine availability. One of the challenges we haven't received Pfizer for the last 2 weeks. That's going to be a challenge for us because that's the only vaccine we can give to under 18, so the 16 to 18 year olds. We ordered more for next week. We're hopeful we'll get that. I don't feel good about that. It's just based on your population and how they figure out the math to do that. For some reason, we don't meet the criteria to get that Pfizer. So that could potentially impact some of our outreach, but I think, it will resolve, then the next week we'll get some or something. So a little concerned about that, but otherwise we're able to get Moderna without too much problem. So that's been Moderna and Pfizer. We've been giving a lot. We haven't gotten a lot of Johnson & Johnson in this county. Only 450 doses of the total have been Johnson & Johnson vaccine.
The clinic that's going on at the fairgrounds, is that all Pfizer? They did Moderna up there too?
Pfizer, yep. So KVH is doing Pfizer, KCHD, our health department is doing Moderna. Skyline and North Shore are doing Moderna and Pfizer. And KC Pharmacy has Moderna as well. And they may have asked for some Pfizer, so only KVH is receiving Pfizer. They have the freezer to do that, and then they have been very graciously sharing their vaccine with the other providers in the county to make sure that that availability is there for residents that want that, or for those that, the 16 to 18 year olds, that's the only vaccine that they can receive. So really happy with where we're at for vaccines. Our case rates have been still kind of quiet, which we appreciate. We're at 765 cases today. We have 9 active. They're all in about the 50-year-old range is the average age right now. Cases this month have doubled over last month, and they are double the cases that we saw last April. So really concerned about what that could look like. We just hit phase 3. We're going to be reevaluated for May 3rd. So the next 2 weeks are going to be really important. That people kind of make the right choices so that we can stay in phase 3 where we're at.
What's the threshold? We obviously know the governor will roll people back.
Yes.
We saw that last week.
They did. They rolled 3 counties were rolled back to phase 2. So in order for us to go back to phase 2 based on our case rate, we'd have to have 100 to 175 cases over the last 14 days. That
If we
seems like
keep
a
our
lot,
number
but that's
under
happened.
100, we're okay.
Yep, we have to stay under 100. We also have to have less than 3 hospitalizations for COVID over the last 7 days. I think it's been at least 2 weeks since we've had anyone back hospitalized. It was just a quick kind of overnight sort of a thing. So we haven't had a lot of hospitalizations in this county, so we've been fortunate there as well.
Is that number you just said less than 100, is that on a per capita or is that a
No,
real
That's a
solid number?
real
Now,
number.
we have 9, we can't go above 100.
Yes, yep. No, we have
Do you have to
9,
meet both those metrics or just one?
just one.
So if you
because they
fail
just
one of those
changed that.
metrics, if we fail the 100, but we don't have any hospitalizations, you still go through it.
So that will be reevaluated May 3rd. So our case rate and the number of active cases we have is very different because sometimes people get tested late in their symptoms. And so you could actually test positive and be recovered within a day or two. So our case rate for the last 14 days is 16, even though we only have 9 active cases right now. So that there's a little nuance there, but 16 is still good. It's just concerning to me that we're seeing this little uptick. They have been associated with social gatherings. So again, know your crowd, wear your mask, get vaccinated. Other than that, we're going to start working on partnering with DOH, and then I'll work with KBH, obviously, and Skyline to make sure we have some vaccine outreach materials targeted towards. We'll have to do some research into maybe what groups aren't getting the vaccine, and that's data I haven't pulled yet, but we'll pull all that and look at that and do some targeted outreach to make sure that those people understand they have access to the vaccine and address maybe some hesitancy that we have in this county. So we're working towards that. Otherwise, working with the Fair Board, I had a really nice conversation with them. I'm really happy with kind of the path forward with them. I've offered to attend any of their meetings that they would like, just as an advisor, and reminded them that obviously they have to bring their final plan to the Board of Commissioners. But they have a good plan. I'm excited. I think I'm optimistic, but hesitantly so, as I have been all year.
I have a question. They used to test, in the beginning of this thing, they were testing people to see if they had COVID in the past.
The antibody.
The antibody test, are they still doing that at all? Are those things available?
I don't know what the availability is in this county. You can probably get that test, but you'd have to have a provider order it and have a compelling reason why, if you wanted your insurance to cover it, I would imagine.
But they're not checking that stat out there to try to figure out how much of the population. Because I'm sure far more of the population has actually had it than what we've actually reported.
Oh, absolutely. I don't know that we're doing any of that surveillance in this county. I'm sure they are in somewhere.
Somewhere, I just haven't heard of it in months and months.
Would be a really interesting
That's
piece of
what I wanna
information.
know. I mean,
Oh,
that's
I'd
gonna
love
affect
to
your herd
know.
immunity
Yeah,
if you're gonna go for your immunity, but that.
I would love to have that info, but that's not.
So what
Are you seeing, now that everybody can practically go in, did you see a bump with that when that opened up, or did you have?
Unfortunately, no, it's pretty disappointing. Like, we were kind of prepared to have our doors knocked in, and that didn't happen. And it's not just our department, that's a similar story for the other healthcare providers in the county. So I think that the people that really, really wanted the vaccine figured out how to get it. There are a lot more places that you can go. You can go up to Yakima to their mass site. I know people went to the Tri-Cities and to Clark County to their mass sites to get the vaccine.
I'm curious on what our percentage is gonna be that's, over my dead body.
I think it will be significant,
I think
unfortunately.
it'll be 50% or
No, I'd say at
30%.
least 20
20.
minimum.
That I could probably deal with that.
So, I mean, we just have work to do. We're just getting to the point, I feel like we're just kind of at a holding pattern at the health department. This is our normal. This is just, we're doing vaccines, we're doing case investigations, which are lower. So we're able to just kind of keep, this is now our business as normal, unfortunately.
So our vaccine supply versus you, so we're being pretty much in balance as far as it sounds like we don't have a lot of folks like waiting and waiting because we just don't have supply, but you also don't have supply that's obviously just laying around not getting used. So,
Johnson and Johnson, but yeah.
well, okay.
That is explainer.
But as far as the other
other
ones, it's the things are kind of in the sweet spot right now. We have about the right number of people coming. Again, we wish,
Yes.
but I guess the question would be then is if we got a big wave of people that were knocking everybody's doors down, would we be able to vaccinate? Could we get supply if we needed to? Is there capacity in the supply chain to do it?
Potentially. They're still doing it, and I can't explain this very well, but the pro ratas, they look at the number of people in your county and then they compare it to the state, and you get the percentages all worked out. And
do the roulette wheel and
yeah, and
look
then
at the stars and
yep.
they end up with the, here's what you're getting.
That's exactly how my life works.
Okay.
Because we do a lot of feedback to them. The providers ask for vaccine. I work with them on what they've asked for, what they've scheduled. We make recommendations to the states. They do your process, I'm pretty sure, and everybody opens their box on Monday and says, well, here's
what do we get?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that continues to be a challenge, just that we don't specifically know exactly what's going to happen from week to week. But I think everybody just isn't really scheduling a lot without knowing they have the vaccine in their hands, is kind of where we're at with that, I think, across the county. But
do you think there might be some of the hesitancy as far as the scheduling is that folks are maybe still think, well, it's, you know, I'll get to it later because there's 50 people waiting in line, and
I think there's some idea
I don't
that
know
they
if we
don't
can
want to take
educate
it from
folks.
people that need it. Like they want to make sure other people have
Right.
gotten it first, kind
you know,
of
right,
thing.
not my turn yet.
Well,
And there's just hesitancy. We've seen a lot of peer pressure. So people come in and say, my friend just got this. They did really well. They told me I needed to come do it. And so then they're making the appointment. But we're hesitant
speaking from
before.
experience, I'm sure there's a bunch of people out there that are not opposed to it.
Right.
But they're waiting to see side effects from other people.
Yeah, and we've
Before
certainly
they
seen that.
finally decide if they want to get it and or which one they want to get.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
and I'm sure the Johnson & Johnson put a pause on a lot
That's
of.
what I'm saying. That might have
things, too.
slowed things down a
Yeah.
smidge.
I'm certain that did, and that's unfortunate, but
And everything's gonna throw a smidge on it. Yesterday, I was talking to a guy that his wife had got the Pfizer in February, and 2 months later, she had 3 brain clots and strokes, which not related to the Pfizer, and that's why I was double checking the Pfizer thing. But anytime that happens and your friends hear about it, that's gonna throw a pause on whether they wanna, you know, just because, I mean, it happens so close to it.
Right.
It's gonna slow down their thought process, so. Sure.
otherwise, I think that's, you know, as far as COVID goes, that's all we have. They're doing a 205 people today vaccine clinic in White Salmon. They're going to one of the agricultural workers companies tomorrow. I think they've got a couple hundred there. So
Okay, so that's
we're doing a
pretty
lot
big
of outreach.
numbers for.
We've been on the east end of the county. We're kind of expanding our horizons a little bit with taking vaccine off site. So that's worked out
Right,
well.
and that's the other thing I could say to possibly reach the people that are hesitant. If the vaccine's at KVH and it's at public health and it's at the fairgrounds, that's all fine and dandy. But if it's set up at a booth on Main Street that parking was 2 blocks away yesterday, you might actually get some of those. Not sure if they want to. It's right there. All right, poke me in the arm.
We've talked about this, and one of the challenges that we have with that is, you know, last fall, we were going out to the Lyle food banks and giving flu shots to anybody that came to pick up food boxes, like, hey, do you want a flu shot? And we do that.
Right.
The issue or the challenge we're gonna have is, if I open a bottle of vaccine, I have to know that I have 10 people to give that to.
Oh, I see.
I can't just like do this onesie twosie.
So even the Moderna, once you pop the bottle, you got to use it all up right then. You
Within
can't
6
give it
hours.
tomorrow. Oh,
Yeah,
interesting. Okay.
so that's, you know, we're hopeful that maybe, and I haven't seen anything that says this, but at some point, if they have single-use vials, that'll really improve our ability to just like go to these sites and do it, but I will not open a vial if I don't have a plan for honestly, actually 11 people
No, I hear that.
lined up. So, because we can't waste vaccine. That's
Or at least people on an emergency list that will come get your last shot.
Yep.
So the 200 a day, is it a mix between first and second shot, or is it primarily second shot?
Yeah, it's a mix.
I have a question, Erin. Can you hear me?
I can't.
What about people from, who are not residents of the county? Have you seen much, do you know how that's, is that a factor?
Yes and no. So I know we've, with North Shore and Skyline, obviously their service district, we have seen patients from Skamania County. That's, I know there have been, folks from other counties that have been able to get their vaccines here because they live, maybe they work here. Honestly, at our clinic, when you call to schedule, I ask you if you're a resident of the county. We encourage you to be a resident of the county. I'm not checking IDs. If you want the vaccine that badly, we'll give it to you.
Well, I appreciate that
In my
openness.
passport.
I think what we want is a vaccinated population. So anyway, of course, we want our residents to get vaccinated, and that's a priority. And it sounds like everyone's really working on that. So
I feel like the bulk of who we see are residents of this county. Like I mean, it's a small county, you know most of the folks. So you walk through, you recognize most folks. But I certainly, at least at our clinic, I just don't see the value of turning someone away. If they made an effort to get it and they have an appointment, we'll make sure they get the vaccine.
thank you.
Okay. Other questions for Erin?
Erin, if we say the vaccine passport comes to be, and right now you're not seeing a whole bunch of people, I mean, it's tailing off, and how many people are signing up. But if you want to get on an airplane and you're going to need it, and so now we're looking at pushing to 75-80% probably of the population. How many people could we do in a day if we had to?
In this county or in my clinic? I think KVH, the most they did in one day was 493-ish. We're right about 200. I think Skyline's 200, 250. North Shore's in the 100 to 200 range. So, I mean, we can get people that, yeah, so there's not, and we won't, I doubt we'll see those numbers in those days again, unless there's a booster in the fall, or a booster dose required in the fall.
Right.
But yeah,
it
won't
a good
be an issue.
possibility though.
I have not officially seen anything, but I'm absolutely planning that that's going to be part of our life because I don't want to be unprepared in the fall when that,
Well,
it is
this
potentially
new
a thing.
program you're going to have will make that a lot easier.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. So we have a lot of infrastructure set in place so that if that comes to pass in the fall for sure, then we're absolutely ready.
And then can you also use this new program for your flu vaccine shots and everything else and getting that all set up?
I was told yes.
Okay.
But I've been so focused on getting the COVID part of it set up. And that was part of the sales call. That was the thing that I asked that we could have that capability. They said that was a possibility. And then it's just been focused on getting the COVID part because that's obviously my life right now.
Erin?
Yes.
Erin, can you hear me?
Yes, Paul.
Yes, I had a follow-up to Commissioner Christopher's question. I believe last week, Governor Inslee announced a change from one to both metrics not being met in order to be moved back from phase 3. I think that was a recent change. Originally, it was one or the other metric not being met, but I believe it's both metrics currently are needed to be moved back in phases.
Yes, that's correct, Paul. I think he announced that, if I remember correctly, on Thursday of last week. So we'd have to have three hospitalizations and over 100 cases in 14 days. 3 hospitalizations over 7 days and over 100 cases in 14 days to get sent back to phase 2. So I think that'll set us up pretty well. There have absolutely been 14-day periods when we've had the 100 to 175 cases, but they're few and far between.
Yeah.
So as long as people just really kind of hang in there for a while longer, I think
And as far as the three
Okay.
hospitalizations go, they have to be hospitalized in our hospitals in our county?
Nope.
Or can they be in Portland and they're still accredited to
Yep.
us?
So occasionally what happens is we find out about hospitalizations after the fact
Uh-huh.
because the Oregon hospitals, maybe they're in a Portland hospital, they'll still report the data to DOH, but we might not find out about it until later. So that doesn't happen very often. Typically people will go through our hospital system, so we'll have that information.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you just check yourself in Portland, there could be a delay and they could come back and say you have 3 hospitalizations that I potentially may not know about. It doesn't happen very often, but that is.
Well, then right now, we're
It's
good
only
because
based on your primary residential address, correct? So
Yes.
you could be staying in Portland, but your primary residence could be here, but you're still gonna
We're
get.
gonna get charged.
yeah, you could have caught COVID in
Potentially.
Portland and
Yeah.
you're still gonna get clipped here.
I think most of the time our data as far as, is pretty good, but we've had that happen a couple of times where they're like, oh no, you've had a hospitalization. We're like, no, actually we haven't, so. And then just getting that corrected to the state level, but as long as cases stay low post spring break, I think we'll be set on May 3rd to stay in phase 3.
Okay, any other questions or comments for Aaron? Okay, not seeing anything. Does that conclude your?
That concludes
Okay.
that's what I
Well,
got
that moved us
today.
a little ahead of schedule for public access to the board. So this would be an opportunity for the public that are either, they could actually be here in person. We do have one member that we actually have I don't think she's here as a member of the public, but you could if you had a comment to make.
No comment.
No comment from there. Or then online, we have lots of folks. Is there anyone wishing to make public comment to the Board of Health? This is your opportunity. If you do, please unmute yourself or raise your hand. Please give us your name and where you're from. Not seeing any.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Ms. Penn.
I was just wondering if any other of our providers.
That's what
or-
I was getting to.
Or
Thank you.
public
Thank you for
servants have
reminding me.
any, would like to offer anything up about what's going on in their corner.
Yes.
Sure, this is Rob at Skyline. And really not a lot to add from what Aaron said. We feel that we have an adequate supply of vaccine now. We're doing mostly all Moderna, but we do have some Johnson & Johnson that we never administered any of it, but we're still hanging on to that. And we're just not seeing as much interest in vaccine, not as many phone calls to get scheduled as we would like to see. But we're ready and prepared and continuing with our vaccination clinics. Well, that's Skyline's update.
Thank you. Cindy, I see you're on. Do you, any updates you'd like to provide from North Shore?
Hi, yeah, it's Cindy. I wanted to say first that we continue to really appreciate working with our health department. They are just fantastic to work with in every way. So we feel really lucky to work with them. Similar to what Rob and Aaron said, we continue to have demand, but it's not at the overwhelming level, which is actually a little bit nicer for now. We have evening and Saturday sessions, and all of our sessions are bilingual. So trying to make it so that people have lots of different options about where to go. Interestingly, we still, even though the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is on hold right now, we still have lots of interest in it. So we're looking forward to that coming back online. For whatever reason, that's a vaccine that some folks have really zeroed in on being the one that they feel comfortable with. So that's great. And then one other thing to add about hospitalizations, just wanted to point out that is probably helped being kept down by our hospitals offering the monoclonal antibody treatment, which is staff intensive and difficult for them to do. So just want to say thank you to them for that is really helpful for all of us, obviously.
Great. Thanks, Cindy. I don't see Leslie, but maybe you're on a number I don't recognize. KBA?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay,
Can
great.
you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'll just echo what Cindy and Rob have said. We still are scheduling, and I have to say, folks prefer the fairground, so we're very thankful that we have the facility out here to run through, and it's been going well. We're hoping that, maybe even as early as the end of May, we can be done out here, because I know that there's activities that really start to get going, and that the grounds get used for other things. So we appreciate the use of the grounds, and so does the county, where, we do get folks from all over the county, and it's been a great facility to use. So, we're, getting, working more into evenings and weekends, where people, we're getting to this tier of working people that really just can't come during the day. So we're, thankfully, we have more daylight hours, and so we'll be doing more evening clinics.
Okay, thanks, Leslie. And I will just say for myself, I have heard, actually, to all the providers and the health department, I have heard nothing but praise for all of the different clinics. That it's like every one of them, I've never heard one negative thing. It's all positive as far as the efficiency and just the professionalism of everybody, and how quick people get in and out through the process. So that's, I just really do think, again, that this it needs to be said that, this county, the folks in this county really stepped up, and, we handled this. We figured out what we needed to do, and we're doing it. And I love the coordination that's going on between the providers and the health department. If you had said that a couple of years ago, I know that wouldn't have been the truth. So I know everybody knew each other, but they knew each other by other names, and I'll leave it at that. So, okay, thank you. We're still in public comment. That was my public comment. I'm not seeing anybody. Is there anything else that anybody wants to bring up for the good of the order, I guess I'd call it? Not seeing any. If we've got no more business before the Board of Health, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, I have a motion from Commissioner Anderson and a second from Commissioner Christopher to adjourn. Any discussion? Not allowing any. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Motion passes unanimously.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, folks.